Welcome everyone to the makeup session of the Youth Mental Health and Disasters, Resilience in and Through the Storm session of the Hampton Conference and Award Ceremony. We welcome back Paul Daniel, Executive Director of Center Associates, to speak on his portion of the session. Please place questions in the chat box and we'll take them at the end. And as a reminder, this session is being recorded. Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the organizers for putting this together. And my sincere apologies for the technological difficulties last time. But we're here and let's make good of the time we have. And just wanted to talk about, I know I shared a little bit of those of you that were here the other day, but I just want to quickly summarize children, adolescents, and trauma. It doesn't matter where we are in life, what we're going through in life, we all experience trauma, whether we're children, whether we're adults. And the important thing is when you look at a trauma, it's an emotional response that people struggle with and people experience when something has happened that dysregulates, that causes them to function out of the norm of how they were functioning before. So for example, if you are, Ashley, can you go to that next slide? If you are experiencing challenges in life, stressors that come every day, and any kind of concerns that we might experience, whether child or adult, we're going to experience some kind of dysregulation that hits us. And what happens is usually when that happens, we have coping skills to manage it, or we struggle because of the lack of coping skills, or our coping skills are not as sharp. And so when you take this down to kids, it means that the kids should know or will know or can learn all these different coping skills, but they might not have their toolbox that is full of skills to manage. So part of trauma is, again, just think about this, it's an emotional response that causes us to function out of the norm a little bit. And now traumas can be positive, it can be negative. And usually the word trauma came out of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is basically during veterans and war times. We'll see a lot of veterans coming back that have experienced some kind of challenging difficulties during their time in war. And we've kind of used post-traumatic stress for that. But trauma is every day. You know, I was giving examples last time. I said, when I go over to McFarland Clinic and receive services, waiting for blood results to come back. Oh, is my cholesterol high? Am I diabetic? Is my liver functioning? That could be traumatic in a sense for me, not for somebody else, but for me, just going, I want to make sure that those things are okay until I get those results and the doctor gives me some kind of remedy for it, whether it's taking medication, whether it's exercising, whether eating right, whatever that is. So traumas can happen that way. It can happen in a death. If there's a death that happens, a family can experience trauma and dealing with that. If you were part of the accident that caused a death, there's trauma. Many of us during these last few months have experienced COVID. And again, whether you have a shot or no shot, anytime I walked into Walmart and thought of somebody coughing, I'm going, I got to run away from them. I got to move away from them because I don't want to get COVID. Well, when I got COVID and when I got all the shots, now I'm kind of like, but people still struggle with trauma. So, Marshalltown, fortunately, has been blessed by a phenomenal team of community providers who come together, from the emergency personnel that's run by Kim Elder to our recovery from our tornado recovery in 2018. We have been hit hard. We had the tornado come through in 2018. And then we had derecho that went through not just Marshalltown, but Marshall County, Tama County, all these different counties, you know, across Iowa, really. Derecho kind of went through. And then obviously the pandemic hit us pretty hard as well. So when we look at children and how they work through trauma, it is usually initially, I remember after the tornado, the community came together. We all jumped in. We all kind of helped each other, from the police to the fire to emergency personnel to mental health to doctors. Everybody, we all came together, and neighbors helping neighbors. We kind of connected and went through this trauma together. And then when derecho happened, it leveled a lot of trees in Marshalltown. It leveled a lot of roofs. And so people came together again. And with the pandemic, what happened was everybody went inside. We didn't want to come out. We didn't want to give COVID or get COVID. So everybody kind of isolated, which caused a lot of stressors, and people struggled with kind of figuring out, how do I maneuver through COVID? So part of this whole presentation is about trauma with kids, but trauma impacts us all. So I want to kind of look at this slide real quick and just be able to kind of walk through some of these things. We did a little group for kids after the tornado. And as you look at this slide, you can kind of see some of the long-term emotions that might happen. In Marshalltown, every time the siren goes off now, I'm kind of alarmed, because I was right in this office where I'm standing watching the tornado, and it went right on our building, over our building, and to the other side. And amazingly, nothing happened to anybody here in the building. And but every time I hear a siren, or every time I look outside this window and I see dark clouds, emotional dysregulation happens. I kind of go, oh, is that a tornado cloud? I know it might not be, but again, that tornado came on us so fast that we were kind of all taken by surprise. So part of understanding those symptoms that might show up later is something that we have to be dealing with. With the pandemic and derecho and so many others, kids, especially with the pandemic, kids have been home a lot, and they had virtual connections with their schools. So what we saw here in Marshalltown was significant amount of anxiety, significant amount of depression, as well as we saw domestic violence increase, domestic disputes, not even so much of violence, just a lot of just dysregulation within the family, because everybody was cabin fevered, everybody was inside, and people were experiencing so much pain and frustration, and then they were self-medicating, whether it's alcohol and other substances, they were self-medicating, and then you work that backwards. Because of self-medication, they were getting depressed, and they would come and seek us. And so this trauma impacts us all. Kids not learning well, or can't get on the internet, just like what happened to me the other day. Internet went out. And so there's frustration that builds up, which also increases that trauma. So physical symptoms, you'll see that a lot. But trauma is going to be part of our lives. It's not if a trauma is going to happen in your life, it's when a trauma happens, what are we going to do for children and help them maneuver through that? So that next slide talks a little bit about the kids started drawing pictures for us, and they started to share what trauma was. And this was a group we did with kids that talked about the tornado. So if you look at that picture, that's what, for that child, that's what trauma was. A lot of confusion, a lot of just dysregulation. So think about this child feeling this during the time of tornado and even post-tornado. And some of the pictures that come after this also surely shows the emotions that the kids were going through. Here's a child that drew, "I was scared when the storm kills someone." Now, fortunately, in Marshalltown, the tornado didn't harm anybody. But the child, feeling what they feel at their age, they were scared, anxious, worried, whatever term we want to use, that it might kill someone. And then the next slide that talks, this child talks about what they heard, and here we go again, the sensory aspect of it, what children hear. So all of a sudden you see the picture there, just shows a boom, and then the rain. But look at what the girl is saying. Dad, she's screaming. She's screaming for security and safety. In the midst of the storm, she's calling for her dad. And so these are those things that are not so much traumatic, we might say, but for this child, she will remember this example and remember the sounds that went with that. And keep going, Ashley, for the next slide. And here's a child go back to that cat. Here's a child that drew, what were you feeling? I was a scaredy cat, you know, and that's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to experience the trauma and then the emotions that come with that, you know. And again, some of this also happens because they can't control it. So their raw emotions come out where I am scared. I'm a scaredy cat. Next slide. And here's a picture of a child showing where in their house, those circles on the top left there are, we all crawled under the table, and that's where we stayed, under the table, while the trees were falling on the right side of the house, you know. And these are emotions and visual representations of what that child was seeing at that time. Next. And so part of, you know, kids, a wonderful thing about kids is they are so willing to share when they're ready to share. We can't force kids to share, but when they're willing to share, they will do a good job in being able to talk about what's going on and to truly share. And so we had them draw pictures, drawing the part that was before me on Tuesday. Mandy was talking about how artwork plays a significant role in kids being able to talk about their trauma. And here, the next picture where the girl is showing a little bit of what she was experiencing really shows a lot of questions, a lot of wonderings, like, man, if I open that door, what's going to be behind that door? And then the next picture talks truly about the significance of what that child was feeling. Look at the faces. Look at the expressions, a lot of sadness. And again, for that child, they're experiencing sadness, worry, concern for everybody else in the family. So part of the risk factors that we need to be looking for is definitely children struggling. And we've noticed a lot more in the last 6 months or so as we've kind of gone through COVID and come out of COVID. We've seen a lot of isolation. I know we talk about social distancing and being 6 feet apart and everything else, but what that cost was for families and kids to not connect with each other. In Mandy's presentation, she talked about high school kids that were feeling like we weren't able to connect with our friends. We missed our friends. That social disconnection through being at home and being cabin fever, through confinement, has changed a child's behavior. And it almost seems like they were in house arrest. The kids were. They couldn't get outside and do things because we would stop it. Don't go out, wear your mask, do this, you got to be 6 feet. You know, all these different expectations that were put on kids during this time caused a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. We saw a lot of depression during this time, as well as, you know, you get 3, 4 kids in the house that can't get out. All of a sudden, they start to rumble with each other. And we had WWF going on in the house, a lot of behavioral issues that showed up, and a lot of frustration. And then you had parents getting dysregulated themselves because of the stressors. Maybe the dad or mom lost a job. Maybe something else was going on, an illness or whatever it was. What caused those triggers then increased the anxiety and everything else that went on with the child struggling. So part of the protective factors, you've got risk factors like this, but then if you go and look at the protective factors that come up, what we're trying to do is create a place of safety. Can you go to that next slide? Provide children where they can feel safe. You know, one of the most important things with kids that are traumatized, and even adults, not just kids, even adults, once we feel safe, there's a sense of, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. I might not know what's all going to happen, but if I can just sense and feel and be with people that are hearing that things are going to be okay, then maybe things will be okay. You know, one of the things we saw was a lot of referrals to school-based counseling, because when these kids were coming back into the school, they weren't used to being with 30 other kids in the classroom. They were not used to having homework every day or a teacher giving assignments and everything else. So we saw a lot of increase in school-based mental health. And we also saw parents and grandparents who were saying, we're frustrated. We can't help teach these kids. We don't know how to do the math. We don't know what social studies assignments. We don't know how to turn on an iPad or turn on this website. So there was a lot of emotions that caused parents to also be dysregulated. So we were working, trying to create that environment where they felt, parents and the children felt safe. And it's important to also work with kids that during these times, to help them normalize some of those feelings, normalize and saying to the kids, hey, you're scared right now. You're hurting right now. You're worried. Oh my gosh, you feel sad. To normalize that rather than, come on, we got to get going. Come on, let's get better. Come on. We can't rush healing. We can't rush trauma. We have to pace it at the place of where that patient is. So, you know, a lot of times people are like, well, what do you want me? Parents are saying, what do you want me to say to my kids to help them get out of this? Well, you just have to love and give them a place of safety, a sense of belonging, that the child knows, hey, I'm in this house, I'm okay. I'm okay. There's not a right or wrong way to express and to share and to talk with children, because what happens is somebody else might say, well, we're doing it different. We're doing it. Whatever fits your family, whatever fits that specific child, whatever the child needs in some sense of providing safety is so important. So, so part of what we have done through school-based mental health, and also seeing kids here in the building ourselves, we have learned to have them express more of their worries, more of their sadness, whatever else they're going through, to help them say it's okay. Because the more you push down, the more you put down inside, it's going to build up and it's going to cause symptoms of just frustration, which leads to definitely depression in the long run. So one of the things that we talk about, what are some reactions of children post-trauma? What are they having difficulties with? One of the things we have noticed, and again, younger kids, adolescents especially, is that trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. Now, I get it. It might not be the trauma that's causing that. It might be this little mechanical thing that we have in our hands all the time, or kids go to bed looking at TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is. I get some of that causes that lack of sleep. But for a child that's gone through some traumatic issues and struggles, many times what we'll find is that they don't want to sleep alone. They want mom and dad or somebody to come in and assure them that things are going to be okay, reading stories to them, leaving a light on in the room. They don't, especially if it's raining or things like that, they are anxious, they are worried. And so one of the things we see a lot in schools too is that kids react differently. Every child is different, right? And so what we'll see is a lot of irritability, a lot of frustration. They have low frustration tolerance. They get frustrated over small things, you know, and so what we have noticed with kids, especially kids, is a lack of energy. They're just not motivated, and that could be because of the sleep. But what's the genesis of the sleep? Is that more social media? Is it screen time? Or is it something they're thinking about at night? Because as a child sleeps, you know, they're constantly moving in their brain. And if they're thinking about or worried about something, that's going to cause a lot of trouble in connecting with teachers, school assignments, and other people during the day. So one of the things that we commonly talk about is, when you look at a child that's been traumatized and are going through trauma, and we look at, gosh, every case is different, right? Every child has a different story to tell. And so part of that is that, oh, they don't have it as much as I do. Well, they have it in a different way. They're experiencing trauma in different ways. So part of this is understanding what else is going on in the child's life to help them work through some of this. One of the things we noticed was children got so used to being at home, right? And during COVID time, and now we're going to put you back in school for 5 days versus 3 days there and 2 days on virtual. So we had a lot of kids experiencing, I have stomach aches. I don't want to go to school today because my tummy's hurting, or I have a headache. And some of that was legit. Some of that made sense, but there were some kids that were playing it too. And so trying to find what's real and what's not was part of our goal through school-based mental health. And so, during this time too, during crisis, remember, children can become so clingy and have tantrums, and their behaviors are going to start to show up in different ways, whether it's they kind of regress a little bit, and whether it's at a grocery store, whether it's at home, whether it's at grandma's house, whether it's at a church setting, wherever it is, children start to act out because of just the trauma that is going on with them. So with the older kids, one of the things that we noticed, and recently in the last few years, is the availability of all these different substances, right? So we have vaping that has become such a big thing, especially in Marshalltown. And so a lot of kids, older kids, are starting to self-medicate. One of the things kids are doing is, with the hand sanitizers, they're starting to drink hand sanitizers because that makes them a little bit numb. And also with the alcohol levels in hand sanitizers, young kids are getting intoxicated, and it is something right there at home, that they're doing. And so we're starting to see a lot of different ways that the kids want to cope with traumatic situations that is unhealthy and harmful for their body. So part of the reactions that we're seeing is good, where people are coming around and helping each other, but at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of kids that are struggling. So the next slide is just a little bit of toolkits. You guys have it there, and you'll have all these documents. There's plenty of tools to use. And again, like I said, there's so many different kids with so many different situations. One size does not fit all, but we need to let the children know that there are legitimate people that want to come alongside of them and help them. There are people that want to care about them, and there are people that are willing to listen. It might not be who they think they are, parents, grandparents, but there are others who can come alongside of them and work with them. One way to limit some of the concerns, especially at nighttime for kids that are struggling, is monitor what they're watching. You don't want kids that are going through trauma to watch violent shows or violent video games. There's so many different video games that are pretty violent. Again, it puts something in their mind which only shows up a little bit later with anger and frustration and a little bit more emotional dysregulation. Keep some routines at home with families, with kids. Kids need routines. And also, one of the things, especially with COVID, there was this, we're all at home together. Now we are coming out of it. And so as we come out of it, still try to salvage some time, especially this summer, to do things as a family, to do things as a cohesive unit that would be helpful. So part of all these different tools, guys, you have it there in front of you. And as you look at that, please tend to them. And the kids are broken, kids are struggling, kids are truly having challenging times in learning to be a kid again. There are a lot of kids that are becoming adults too quickly. And so part of that is because parents are working and circumstances, whatever the circumstances are. Kids are having to be babysitters for their own siblings or take care of an older parent there because of struggles, or they're witnessing domestic disputes. And so they're pouring in so much. You know, one of the statistics that we use is 83% of what kids learn is modeled. 83% of what kids learn is modeled. Think about that just for a minute. That's a lot. So how we live our lives as parents, adults, caretakers, there's little eyes watching us. 83% of what they learn is what they see. So if our home is unhealthy, if our home is struggling because we're going through trauma ourselves, then the kids are going to be traumatized. So we need to get to that place where the kids are open to talking about it. Lori, I'm going to open it up to questions before I keep going here.
Thank you, Paul. We did have one question that you kind of touched on a little bit when we were talking about depression. The question is, if a person experiences depression as a child, is it more likely that the person will become depressed or experience depression again in their adult years? And you did kind of touch on this as far as if the depression isn't addressed, but I think this question that's here is a little bit more broad than that.
Yeah, so, you know, again, is it diagnosed depression? Is there, you know, one of the things, great question. Thank you for asking that question. One of the questions or one of the statements I would make is when we look at depression, anxiety, and trauma and things like that, remember, traumas are things that have triggered emotions, right? Something has happened. We just don't wake up today brand new and going, oh, today's going to be a traumatic day. Something might have happened, you know. But with depression, one of the things we need to be looking at is the genetical background. If a child has depression, we always go back to, okay, did the parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts have depression? Okay, and then we look at psychological. It's called the biopsychosocial model. Okay, so the biological, did they have it? Psychologically, their personality, a person could be introverted, a child can be introverted, quiet, and function, but that doesn't mean they're depressed. But if they show symptoms of all the depression symptoms, right? No energy, no motivation, suicidal, lacking focus, and all these different elements, not eating, tired a lot. I mean, if those symptoms are there, that is ongoing rather than a situational thing, ongoing, then we take it pretty seriously and give the diagnosis. And if it's not dealt with, again, so you have the biological, psychological, and then social, meaning that who are we around? What is our environment telling us? You know, and so if I'm not doing my part, then that depression as a child can get into our adult stages, and then we have depression until we figure out where the roots of it is. And I've always done this in therapy. I want to get to the root. I just don't want to give medication and do these different things and saying, okay, here, go ahead, call me in 3 months. No, I want to get to the root of why the belief system has to change in order for a child and now an adult. An adult is a child who grew up, right? And if we have seeds that are not healthy in our childhood, those seeds are still going to be part of our adulthood. So we got to get to the roots and help heal those seeds that are wounded.
Great, thank you for that, Paul. We are getting near the end of our time. We have just a couple minutes, and we did have one more question asking if you have time to touch on how you helped with critical incident stress debriefing with the first responders and caregivers. However, I know we also want to know if you have anything else in your presentation that you wanted to touch on, maybe you are able to cover both items. We do have just about 1 or 2 more minutes left.
Yeah, so the CISD is, you know, it's kind of for us health professionals, you know, we also suffer, right? I went through the tornado, I went through derecho, I went through COVID, you know, and so I myself, I can't sit there and tell you, oh my gosh, this is the best thing for you to do and things like that. I believe I've walked it with our EMS, the police, the fire people here. And one of the things is that sometimes we in the health profession are seen as, oh, here they come to save the day, you know, but we also struggle. So it's important for our EMS people, for our frontline people who are there. I've done so many with our Marshalltown group on just paramedics and helping them understand when they enter into a trauma situation, those emotions and what they saw go through their life. You know, and so for the CISD, for emergency personnel that's working, and you have to continue to keep on working this out, keep on talking, find each other, find help. Not just kids, we have to also get through this ourselves because we are in jobs and positions of trauma that is every day. And so part of I know this is talking about kids, but ultimately trauma will affect us. And if it's not taken care of, it's going to impact us in the long run.
Thank you, Paul. We are right at our time. Was there anything final that you wanted to say on your presentation before we conclude for today?
No, I'm good. Please call me or touch base with Lori, and they'll be able to get you connected with us here in Marshall County. And if we need to come and do some CISD critical incident stuff, we are willing to do that. We work closely with our team here in Marshall County. So I'm excited to be available to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. And for our participants, those who are joining us for our next session, it'll begin at 1 p.m. It's the relationship tabletop experience. So you think you're alone in a disaster. You're welcome to stay logged into Zoom, and we'll move you into the wait room in between these sessions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.